Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi al-mursaleen astafa. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala abdika wa rasulika wa maulana Muhammadin wa barik wa sallim. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Is here? We only know. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi al-mursaleen astafa. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad wa barik wa sallam. Adjust to the mic. So tonight, inshallah, we're dealing with something that is important to people. It's called the Islamic will. And then we'll continue from where Brother Asad left off last week. Now, I want to make it clear, we're not dealing with inheritance. If we're dealing with laws of inheritance, that's really quite a bit of information and very complex sometimes based on the questioning. So we're not dealing with inheritance, we're dealing with the Islamic will or will and the concept of the will. And by all means, ask any will questions if you want at the end of my session, and then at the end of Brother Asad's session, we could ask any other related questions. And if you don't understand something during the class and you remember after, that's okay. You could still ask even after the class. So tonight, inshallah, we're dealing with this issue of the Islamic will, and we're starting with, I'm not getting the, maybe you need to, okay, it's good, yeah, thanks. I'm starting with Quran. Whenever you want to discuss a particular topic, marriage, death, divorce, will, you always look at Quran first and then Hadith. So the first thing we're looking at is what the Quran has to say. And Allah is saying, Kutiba alaykum. And those of you who remember the verse of Ramadan, which we'll hear about very often, coming up, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, Kutiba alaykumus siyam. So the same word is used, it's a past participle, has been prescribed, has been decreed. So if you hear the verse of the Quran saying that fasting has been prescribed and the word kutiba is used, the word kutiba is also used here. What does that mean? It is prescribed. It is decreed for you. Kutiba alaykum idha hadara ahadakumul maut. Allah says, prescribed for you when death approaches any one of you. If you are ill, last week the term we used was terminally ill. If you are ill and death is about to approach, Allah gives you kutiba. Allah says, this is decreed upon you. This is prescribed for you. What is it? That you should make a bequest. You should make a bequest for parents and near relatives. You should make a wasiyah. You should make a will for parents and near relatives. Who are parents and near relatives? The Sunnah decides and tells us what this ayah means. Parents mean, of course, mommy and daddy, and near relatives mean your children, your son, your daughter, etc., etc. So your parents and near relatives, according to what is acceptable, a duty upon the righteous. Allah says, haqqan alal muttaqeen. There's a duty upon the righteous. So the scholars have taken this to mean, this ayah, that Allah is commanding us. It's not fard, but it is a strong recommendation, not like fasting, that we should in fact do something called a wasiyah, a will. But I put in a caveat here. You only do a will if you have thing to give. If you have nothing to give, what are you doing a will for? In other words, the decree, but fasting is for everybody. You have no choice. This one, you only do the will, even though the word kutiba is used, you only do a will, write a will, prepare a will, if you have something to bequeath. If you have nothing to bequeath, well, then there's no reason to write and prepare a will. This is the first thing to establish the fact that a will is important. The second one comes from Hadith of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, it is the duty of, and this is Sahih Muslim, it is the duty of a Muslim who has something. Look at it, it is the duty of a Muslim who has something. If you have nothing, therefore it's not your duty. It is the duty of a Muslim who has something which is to be given as a bequest, not to have it for 2 nights without having his will written down regarding it. Therefore, this means that we should not go to sleep. 3 days shouldn't pass us without having something that might be considered as a wasiyah, what you want to bequeath. Now, let me just make this point, which will come later on. Imagine all your assets. You have 100% of your assets. You're only allowed in your will to give away 1/3. Anybody could make a guess why? Why is the Islamic prescription of all your assets, only 1/3 you're allowed to distribute via your will? Why not all? Because you have to? Very good. So the prescription is that your family cannot remain poor. Family cannot remain with anything. So you can't give away all that you have to your friend, your family, your auntie, your nana, and anybody else, and then your family doesn't get anything. So the 2/3 really should be for your inheritors, those who can inherit from you. That's what the 2/3 for. And your 1/3 is what you can give to a charity, you can give to somebody else. I'll talk about that in a little bit. What if you have an adopted son, an adopted daughter? What if you have a non-Muslim relative? You took Shahada and your sister is non-Muslim. Can you give them something? They cannot inherit from the 2/3, but they could get from the 1/3. Give them the house, give them the car. I'm making a next point here because I want to be brief to give Brother Asad time. I'm making a next point here. I jokingly said a little while ago, if you have nothing to give, well, then what you're doing a will for, right? I'm making this point now that if you are alive and you want to give relatives, family members, and so on, feel free to do so while you are alive. Because when you're dead, the Islamic requirements take over. And this is when we divide how much for the wife, husband, children, son, daughter, etc., etc. But if you are alive and you give your assets to your children, to whoever you want to give, and you die with nothing, the wasiyah, if at all, you have to give, if anything remains in your estate, well, then only then it is given and distributed to your inheritors. But if you have nothing, understand the point. In other words, for those of you who have and you want to give while you're alive, feel free to do so. Just make sure that you are just. Not going to cover that, but the Prophet spoke about that. Man said, my son don't talk to me, he just treat me bad, he does this. You don't have to give them everything, but just be just to the people who should in fact get from you, which we'll deal with probably in a little more detail another time. So it is a duty. Preparing a will is a duty upon the Muslims, based on the hadith and based on the Quranic ayah. However, you should only create a will if you have belongings and you have items which you wish to distribute, either to family members or non-inheritors or to a charity. So in a will, you will find a few things. Number one, in any will, Islamic will, you will find an executor, somebody who is named as the person responsible for distributing your stuff after. Number two, you will find what you bequeath to charity. For example, you could give a portion of what you own to Masjid al-Hadi, to the IDM. You can do that in your will. You can also say that I don't want this in my funeral. Or somebody may not have Muslim family. You can state in your Islamic will that I want to be buried according to Islamic rites. You can also say that my assets should be divided according to Islamic law, and this sheikh and this maulana or this mufti should in fact be consulted. In your will, you can say all of that. But you don't determine after you're dead who gets 1/6 and 1/10. That has already been determined by Islamic law. All right. However, you should only create a will if you have anything. An Islamic will is extremely important as it takes care of all your inheritance and your final wishes according to your Islamic religious beliefs. And in reading this point, some of the scholars have said, this hadith, innamal a'malu bil khawatim, that your actions will be judged according to the endings. They say you want your ending to be good. You want your ending to be good because your actions will be judged according to the endings. And they say having a good ending is to do something called a wasiyah. A wasiyah is a will. And this type of will is different compared to standard wills. An Islamic will handles inheritance according to Islamic principles and requirements while still abiding by the law of the land. All right, how does it take root? You have to go to a lawyer and prepare it. But inshallah, what we will also do, I'll go through a couple of templates for you and we'll send that. We'll send you an Islamic will template. And you can fill out in your own and then go to the lawyer and say, this is what I want. Or you have a guide upon which to prepare an Islamic will. It's a legal document that states who benefits from and who can use the assets from your estate. how your property is to be dealt with, whatever property remains if you have, and which of your trusted friends or family member is in charge of distributing your estate. So people come to me and they say, Brother Mirza, can we put you as somebody who will be our executor? I would hesitantly say yes, but I am the executor for a couple of families that I know, and they put my name. So if Allah takes them before me, well, then I'm responsible for distributing or looking after the distribution of whatever remains. Somebody even came to me and said, well, if I die, my children, I want you to be responsible for them. And yes, in a will, you can say who you want to be a guardian of your children. If you don't say that, what will happen? Well, what could happen is that any family member could take it, or the state could take charge. So you can say in an Islamic will, the guardian of my children, should I die before them, should be so and so and so. And that can be honored. Those things can be honored. A couple of reasons, maybe 3 reasons are given you why you should write a will. It's a religious obligation. Fasting is a religious obligation. Zakat is a religious obligation. Doing a will is a religious obligation. The Quran has set out guidelines for who inherits our assets, and we will be accounted for this. So if people who are not inheritors get from what your inheritance is, well, then you are accountable for that. If we pass away without a will, we have neglected a religious obligation. Writing a will means tidying up and completing our affairs in this world. The significance of this good deed cannot be underestimated. So you could prepare the template we'll send for you. You could prepare your own. You could have a couple of family members sign it, and then you could eventually go to a lawyer to have it certified, etc., or notary public. Therefore, a Muslim should not delay in writing the will. Just have it, keep it. We suggest to people when we do Hajj training, we actually give them a template and say, prepare your will because you don't know if you're coming back. Just prepare it and give it to somebody here in Trinidad. In the event you don't return, Allah knows best, that this will be the thing will be used to distribute your assets. This is the hadith again. It is the duty of a Muslim who has anything to bequest to not let 2 nights pass without doing a wasiyah. So this is the point I made, 2/3 and 1/3. You're allowed to give away, distribute 1/3. 2/3 already decided for you by Allah and His Messenger. We're not going to go through tonight. What does the wife get? What does the husband get? How much for a son? What if you have 2 daughters and 1 son, or 5 sons and 2 daughters, or all sons or all daughters, or if your wife dies? That is inheritance. So we're not going to do that tonight, those percentages, but it's easy to get. It ensures that you are following Islamic laws, one of the reasons for the Islamic will. In Islam, there are clear rules for how to divide up 2/3 of what you own. As for the remaining third, you're free to give it to whoever you want. And I know families who have an adopted son, an adopted daughter. You say, but this daughter treated me better than my own. But they can't inherit from me. You're allowed to give them something. You're allowed to from this 1/3. So for example, you can set aside a specific amount for sadaqatul jariyah. You have no adopted children, but you can give something for sadaqatul jariyah, for perpetual charity that will work long after you. It is therefore important to write a will so you can explicitly state that you want your wealth to be distributed according to Islamic law. And if you say in your will that you want your wealth to be distributed by Islamic law, and you set somebody as the benefactor, as the executor, well, then the law of the land will honor that. Will honor that. Number 3, you can ensure that your loved ones are provided for. Sa'ad, a companion of the Prophet, reported, the Prophet ﷺ visited me while I was ill in Mecca. I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, I have some wealth. Can I donate all of it? I want to get plenty blessings. Can I give away all? The Prophet said, no. Sa'ad said, what about half? The Prophet said, no. I said, 1/3? The Prophet said, yes, 1/3, but this is still too much. It is still too much. That you leave your inheritors wealthy is better than leaving them dependent, begging for what people have. And mind you, if you didn't know, I'm telling you that the best charity to spend is the charity you spend on your family members. Even before Gaza. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying this is what Islamic fiqh is. And even for zakat, do you know a principle of zakat? It should be for your locality first before you go outside. However, it's okay to give it to Gaza and to China and to Myanmar and to Sudan. It's okay. But I'm saying from a religious, legal point of view, these are the things that we need to note of. Whatever you spend on them is charity for you, even the morsel of food to your wife. And this is from a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. Allah's messenger, from this hadith, there's an important point. Allah's messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, thus placed a huge emphasis on taking care of one's family after we have passed away. Leave something for them. You don't want to know that you pass away and your daughter or your son knocking pillar to post, as we say in Trinidad. If you can and you can afford it, leave something for them. Advising Sa'ad to consider this before he even thinks about Sadaqatul Jariyah. I hope you understand this point. Sa'ad is being told by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to consider leaving for his family even before considering donation to the Islamic charity. So what is an Islamic will? There are 4 duties when a Muslim dies that need to be done, need to be performed in regards of these things. Number 1, before you divide anything from your assets, you have to pay funeral expenses. Last day, our brother Asad mentioned a narration from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Janazah is about to be performed. The Prophet is about to perform Janazah. And he had this habit, he will say, does this mayyit owe anybody anything? And if the answer is no, he will then perform Janazah. There was one time he's standing to perform Janazah. And he says, does this dead person owe anybody anything? Somebody say, yes, he owe, I think it might have been 2 dinars or something, very small, wasn't too big. The Prophet refused to pray Janazah. One companion named Abu Qatada, he says, Ya Rasulullah, I got paid. You don't worry, I got paid for him. It wasn't paid, but there was a promise to pay. And the Prophet performed Janazah for him. So there's a question, for example, about Hajj. Can I go to Hajj if I have a debt? I'm paying for my car still. I'm paying for the house. I have this loan from granny. The answer is that yes, you can go to Hajj if you have a provision in place to pay it. You understand the point? You're paying every month and you have a standing order. It's coming out of your salary, or you take the money and you give it to your granny from the loan. In other words, if you have an arrangement to continue your payment, then it is permissible to go to Hajj even though you have a debt. It's preferable for you to clear the debt before you go, but it is permissible. And therefore, in this case, you have to pay funeral expenses first out of your estate. However, we have had situations where people die and the masjid say, don't worry, I got to pay for it. And that's okay. But if it is the masjid doesn't say they're going to pay for it, or no Muslim man or woman say they will pay for it, out of your estate, the first thing that needs to be paid is your funeral expenses. How much it costs for a funeral now? A Muslim funeral, anybody know? How much? But it used to be 5, boy. You long time boy, Shaheed boy. Used to be 5. Anywhere between 7 and 9 now. 7 and 9 sometimes it could cost. Yeah, so it has gone up, it has gone up. And that includes the cloths and the board and the digging of the hole and everything. No worries to you. But it's quite costly now for a family who on the zakat list. They can't find 9,000 to pay. But once we have assets, the second thing is that payment of your debts must happen. Then after that, if anything remains, then your inheritors can get. The executor now will be able to work out assets and liabilities, and anything that remains after this, only then. And the last one is distribution of the remaining estate among the heirs according to the Sharia. Al-Wasiyah is the term given for an Islamic will, which is an important requirement for all Muslims, as we mentioned in the Hadith and the Quranic ayah. It is understood that carrying out an Islamic will can provide you with the potential to get barakah and mercy from Allah. An Islamic will is a legally binding contract that specifically gives instructions that are laid down by the individual in accordance with Sharia. I will show you a template what this looks like. And regarding individuals' assets and wishes, about what they decide to leave behind. And you can put wishes in your wasiyah as well. You can put wishes meaning, I decree or I declare that my body should not be open. I declare or I decree that in fact so and so should happen. My body should be taken to my home. In other words, you could put wishes in your wasiyah, as long as your wishes are according to Sharia, right? You can't put things that are against the Sharia. In an Islamic will, the assets which you have left should be first used to pay off your funeral expenses, all of these things we mentioned. And after all these obligations, then your heirs, H-E-I-R-S, can inherit. Some individuals say that You could bequest something to a charity. You can give an organization that continues to do dawah work. That's okay. A masjid, a piece of land, whatever you want, but only 1/3 of your assets, as we mentioned. Predetermined rightful inheritors are the immediate family members of the individual. Your spouse, the inheritors will be your spouse, your parents, and your children. Spouse, parents, and children. Besides rightful inheritance, when we deal with inheritance, this is debt, this is wasiyah. When it comes to inheritance, you even could go more than that. You could go to your father, your children, grandchildren, and grandfather, and so on. But that's a different topic altogether that relates to inheritance. Besides rightful inheritance, you're also able to gift certain possessions to other family members. So I'll give you a scenario here. Imagine you have a husband, a wife, son, daughter, and adopted son. The husband dies. The only person who can benefit as inheritors will be a wife, a son, and a daughter. And several permutations could happen here. You could have wife and husband here. You could have husband, son, son, daughter. Daughter, one son. Husband, no wife because she died. One son, no daughter. You have several permutations. But the amount or the percentage which they get has already been decreed, meaning your percentage from the 2/3. And other than that, your adopted son, your brother who is not Muslim, your relative who may not necessarily have been very close to you and a long lost friend, you're free to give them something from that out of the 1/3. But I want to go back to a point I made earlier. While you are alive, you are free to give in somebody's name a lot of land, the house, and whatever you want. In other words, when we leave this world, I have nothing to give. Nobody could inherit from me because I don't need to make a will because I have nothing else. Everything has already been given. You're free to do that as well. Bequest to charity are one of the main differences between an Islamic will and others. This allows flexibility for the individual to do whatever they want. I should also make another point. The scholars are of the view that even though Islam gives a certain percentage for a wife, for a son, for a daughter, for a husband, etc., it is not cast in concrete. It is not fard, meaning this, that if the daughter is getting this amount, as a family, you can agree to give her more. Out of the 2/3, she's getting a certain percentage, and the son says, Ma, I okay, give she some of what I have, give she a little bit more. That is perfectly fine if there is some kind of an agreement with the shareholders. However, it must be done within the maximum 1/3 spectrum. 1/3 of the individual's assets are available to be accepted, and this is an optional decision. You don't have to. And bequests are allowed to be given to anyone. However, most Muslims who choose to use this actually give it to an Islamic charity. Most people. Why? Make a guess why they'll give it to a charity. Because they wanted to work for them when they're dead. When you die, this is what will work for you. Food to be given to people all over the world. A masjid, a graveyard. Some people contribute to an ambulance, whatever you do. There are a couple of hadiths, one from Sahih Muslim. When the son of Adam dies, his deeds come to an end except 3 things. Sadaqah Jariyah, which is what we're talking about here. Beneficial knowledge, or a virtuous child who prays for him. We have no guarantee about children. We have buried people. I have buried people who are Muslims, and I know that they have children who are Muslims, but none of the children even know one dua to make for them. And therefore, there's no guarantee for this one. Therefore, spend time with your children to teach them values and du'as. So, Sadaqatul Jariyah is the one we are talking about here. So, your executor need to be able to determine assets and liabilities. And in one of the templates we'll give you, you can in fact work that out easy. But your assets and liabilities can change, not so? You can have something today and tomorrow you don't have it because you lose it. Or you gain another piece of land the next day. So, it can change. There are a couple of hadiths that I'm sharing with you as well, where the Prophet says in Sunan at-Tirmidhi, the soul of the believer is suspended because of his debt until it is paid off. This is why it's important for us, as long as we are alive, to deal with the debt as best as we are able to. And the soul of the believer is attached to his debt until it is paid off. I told you the Prophet refused to pray Janazah for somebody who had a debt, and it wasn't $1 million. It was something small. If you have a debt and you die, that debt goes upon the family members, you know. It is their responsibility to pay off that debt. The Prophet says all the sins of a martyr are forgiven, excepting debt. Good. So sharing with you now, as I end up, a couple of Islamic templates, or templates for an Islamic will. I'll go into it really quickly, and we'll send this for you, inshallah, and you can use it appropriately. Yeah, I could sit on me. Yeah. All right, good. So I'll share with you three. Two of them from foreign and one of them from a local organization. I think the local one is quite good, actually. Oh, need the mic here? Do I need the mic here? Thanks. You know you have to do this? Or this here? What is? Sit down. Yeah, so I will fix it after the end. Hold it. Yeah, Bismillah. So we know what a wasiya is. We looked at what the Quran says about wasiya. We looked at the hadith of wasiya. We know what a wasiya is. We know the expenses that has to be paid before inheritors can benefit. I'm sharing with you now a couple of templates for Islamic will. This is one of them for an Islamic will and testament. Starts off with the praise of Allah, putting a hadith here. And I so and so bear witness. I enjoined upon those of my family members. And in this particular wasiya, there's some advice for family members. And then here we have my financial will. Debts are in fact included. What is due to me may be collected from. This is if things are owed to you now. Your family will know this, or the executor. Of the trust kept in my custody, you're telling your family members, I have this pants, and I have this car, and I have this gas tank, and I have this being, to return it to the rightful owner. You're telling them in your will, I bequeath in sadaqah not exceeding 1/3 of my estate. You can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you can give it to Masjid Hadi, you can give it to IDM alone, or you can divide it up between 2 and 3 organizations. I declare that I have forgiven everyone who has backbitten me. You could put that in your wasiyah. These things are not necessary. My final bequest for my family and children is the same as that of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The prayer, and I advise my family to have patience in accepting Allah's will. You can, written on behalf of so and so. This is one template. I'm showing you another one. Should be in Word or PDF. Okay. Right. Good. Okay, this one was prepared by a local organization, and I think it's not too bad. It covers some of the essentials and the fundamentals. It was prepared by Jamia Madinatul Ulum. This is the group in Gasperillo, not Gasperillo, Marabella. So this is the last will and testament of me, our name of so and so in the island of Trinidad. I, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby revoke any former wills, and I hereby nominate so and so as the executor of my estate. I told you one of the things a will have, a wasiyah I will have, is an executor. So you're saying who your executor is. In the event of any one or more of my said executors predeceasing me during his term of office or declining to act, then the remaining executors, the remaining names will act as the executors. I hereby grant to the executors of my estate such powers as allowed by law, and I hereby direct my executor to so and so and so, pay funeral expenses, cover all my debts. I declare that my estate consists of, and here we list some assets, any account, property, vehicle, company shares, etc. In the event of any balance remaining out of the 33 and 1/3% of the net value of my estate as mentioned in clause 4, I hereby make wasiyah according to the laws of Islam and give and bequeath as free and absolute legacies to the following charitable organizations. So you can give it to you can name the organizations here. Thereafter, we then say, I execute all of my interest after the execution of paragraph 4, so and so to receive this, my cousin, my this. I authorize my executors to spend such sums as carrying out. I direct that of my estate in the event that there being any dispute relating to the interpretation of this will or the administration, liquidation, or distribution of my estate. You refer to Sheikh so-and-so, Maulana so-and-so, this particular Islamic organization, this Imam, you can put that as well. It's very possible that Sheikh or that Imam could die before you, right? So you could put more than one name or an organization. And you have two people sign as witnesses, and this is a template. And the last template I'm showing you is this one here, Islamic Will and Testament, a little bit more comprehensive. And these are the things this will cover. Identity of testator, as you, person who dies, preamble, funeral rights and benefits. Really quickly, I'm going through it with you. General instructions. Then my immediate family. You list their full name, relationship, date of birth, contact address, additional comments. So you make it easy for the executor not to have them, because your family member could be in Australia, could be somewhere in Africa. So you list all of those contacts here. My immediate family info continued. Of course, this is plenty family. If you have several wives and children, you have plenty names to fill out. I so and so, and this one I'm sending you here is a fillable one, meaning it's a Word document you can actually type in. All right? I bear witness that so and so, that my counsel to my relatives, please do not preoccupy yourself after my death. I hereby nominate and appoint so and so as my executor. I ordain that my body be prepared for burial by Sunni Muslims according to the principles and practices. I ordain that absolutely no non-Islamic religious service or observance shall be conducted. We have had people come to us and say, we're wondering if to do the church first or the masjid first, for weddings as well as funerals, because the families are so mixed up and they are confused, they don't know what to do. So I ordain that my absolutely no non-Islamic religious service. I ordain that no pictures, crescents and stars, decorations, crosses. I ordain that my body shall not be transported over any unreasonable distance, meaning if you die in Australia, you're saying here, bury me in Australia. Anybody know the cost of bringing a dead relative from United States? It used to be $20,000. Now you're talking about $40,000 to bring somebody in, a casket. I ordain that my grave be dug in accordance with so-and-so, and we'll talk to you, inshallah, when we get to graves. You'll see the way that we do graves here is not the only way. There's something called lahad, which is in fact done elsewhere in other parts of the world. That might be closer to the sunnah. So we will look at that, we'll look at what is done here, and we'll look at what is the best thing to do and what we should do when the body is going down. We'll look at all of that, inshallah. I ordain that my grave be leveled with ground. So you could put all of this stuff. And I hereby nominate and appoint custody of minor children and guardianship. You could say that as well. Allocation of estate, my charitable contributions, how many organizations you want to give. If one, that's okay. Distribution of the residue, separatability. And this is just a formula that tells you if you have no other relatives, one wife, a husband, a father, how you should distribute it. This gives you a little bit of information. Remember, we're not dealing with inheritance, we're dealing with a wasiyah. But it's general information, good for you. All the other pages deal with this in a little detail. Let me stop here. I've taken quite a bit of time. Before I hand over to Brother Asad, let me see if you have any questions related to wasiyah and wills based on what we talked about tonight. Will question.
If by chance you will more than you want to, and the executor comes from after you, you have to increase the amount of much you want to.
So if you give more than you want to, the principle is that the people who get more want to, they should contact them to give back. Yeah, that's the first thing you do. If they choose not to, and they say, I get it from so and so who died, I give them back nothing, there's very little you could in fact do except take them to court. So you have to take whatever remains and divide it among the heirs. But generally, Islamically, if you get more, if even a family member gets more as an inheritor, and you didn't realize it then, and you realize it after, you should give back what you didn't have. Yeah.
When you do the calculations,
Yeah.
does will more than you want to before giving it out. Does the executor take back?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, the answer is yes. Yes. I understand. The answer is yes. Sunni. This is one example that says my body should in fact be prepared by Sunni Muslims. The word is Sunni. The word Sunni here is used, and this template is really one from abroad. Is because where this will was done, there are people who are Shia, there are people who are Brilvi, there are people who are other kinds of things, and therefore there are some different things that people do in those funerals and how they prepare the body. I have been to a Shia funeral in Trinidad and Tobago, and they do some things that are strange. Has anybody ever attended a janazah? How many takbirs are there in a janazah? Anybody know? 4? Who say 4? Where you get 4 from? Do you know you could have more? You could have more takbirs in a janazah. You could have 7 takbirs. I attended a janazah of a Shia in Trinidad, and they did 5 takbirs. Not only that, they were doing, last week Sheikh Asad mentioned something about talqeen. It's about encouraging your dead person to say La ilaha illallah. I witnessed with my own ears and my own eyes that they were doing talqeen while the body was being transported from the mosque to the cemetery, and while we were putting the body down, they were doing talqeen as well, which is not from the Sunni tradition. And this is why in this particular template, you could put it or you don't bound to put it. We may not have the issue here, but in another organization, in another country, sorry, you may have the issue with people having Shia, Sunni, Deobandi, and all kinds of other things could confuffle the family and confuse them and do things that are sometimes inimical to what the correct Islamic practice is. So, okay. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Right. I understand what you're saying. What therefore is there a minimum amount to make a will? I said in the beginning, if you the hadith says that if you have something to bequeath, meaning if you have nothing, you don't make a will, you don't make a wasiyah. Even though kutiba is used in the ayah of Quran, kutiba alaykum hadara. Even though that is used, you have nothing to bequeath. Is there a minimum amount? The answer according to the fuqaha is that no, there is no minimum amount. However, logics and so on will tell us that it will relate to a little bit more than a few dresses and a few hijabs. Right, a little bit more than that. We're talking was maybe property, an account in the bank, etc., etc. Right? If you don't have that kind of stuff, well then a wasiyah may not be necessary. It's better she give the hijab and the pots and the pans and so on before she dies to somebody. One gentleman, one Muslim brother, subhanallah, one Hajj leader in the country, he says to me, he says, Brother Mirza, when I die, I only want one person to say a few words, and that is you, and I have plenty jubba and jalab. I want you to take all of them. You don't tell me that already. you say you is my size. Sorry. Yeah. All right. What criteria should be there for the person, or criteria should be there for the person to be the executor? Islamically, the person should be, of course, Muslim, preferably Muslim, and of sound mind as well, and somebody who is just and somebody who is honest. Other than that, really little, nothing else. But somebody who, my mother, sorry to give you my personal example, my mother had a house and a land, and my mother called me and she signed it over to me. She said, this is the family, about putting it in your name because of so and so, because she trusted me. Somebody you have to trust. Somebody you have to trust to become your executor. Sound, honest, just, Bismillah, and that's it. An executor could be male or female. Islam doesn't say it's male or female. Yeah. So I mean, a female can be. I don't want to take much more time. I want to hand over to the brother. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Sure. Yes. So he says you're divorced. You had children with the wife. You had children. These are your children. But then the children are inheritors. You divorce the wife. The wife doesn't get anything from you because she is divorced. But the children are your children. If you want to give to the mom, you give share from the 1/3. Yes. Sure. Right. So in some other countries, for example, the scholars in the UK say if somebody doesn't have a will, well, then UK law kicks in. UK law then decides how your thing is distributed. You could have fighting among the family members, and you could have who won this. And believe me, I know of families right now in Trinidad and Tobago. It's frightening and scary to see who in court. I know of a family now, the 89-year-old father in court, and one brother and one sister fighting, and they're taking the 89-year-old man in court to fight for one house. So if you don't have a will, not that you've done anything wrong. It's just that what we have done, we have made a situation difficult after we die for the separation of our property. So this is why the understanding of the importance of the wasiya should in fact be in our minds, so that we have no control over what anybody else do. What we do is to make sure we have it before we leave. If we don't, well, then we can simply say, if we are dying and people are around us, we can say to the family members, if not in writing, please, I want whatever I have to be distributed. And I've seen in Trinidad and Tobago, they say to the uncle, I want you to have this, and brother, I want you to have that. And they have witnesses hearing that. And then we can also accept that verbal thing as well. The writing is the preferable thing, but we could say it verbally if it is we still alive. But we have not done anything wrong if we don't have a will, but it is highly recommended based on the hadith and based on the Quranic ayah that we mentioned. So we send you the template, guys. You know what to do. Fill it out, give some tanti to hold it for you, give an uncle to hold it for you, give it a brother to hold it for you, but fill it out. We're giving you one that's fillable, and we're giving you a couple of them that you can actually use for just references. All right? Khairun. Jazakumullahu khairan. We hand over now to continue from where we were last week. You're sending the material. You're sending the material.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, al-hayy alladhi yuhyi wa yumit, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulihil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. All praises for Allah, the Lord of the worlds, al-hayy, the ever-living, who gives life and gives death. And we ask Allah to send blessings and salutations upon His noble messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his family and his companions. So brothers and sisters, last time we had talked about, Brother Mirza talked about the preparation for death, meaning that, remembrance of death. And I had spoken also about what the dying person should do and the people around him, right? And I had shared with you all also, just give me 1 second, yeah? Sorry. Right, and we had spoken about that in this course, it is not just basic fiqh, meaning when you are bathing, which side of the body do you start with and so on, but rather we are trying to emphasize certain higher objectives, which I just wanted to remind you that, last time we covered the first one, the need for firm belief and acceptance that all trials are decreed by Allah, and to have patience during that time of calamity. And as we go along, we'll focus on the others to supplicate sincerely to Allah for the forgiveness of the deceased. And throughout, we'll be focusing on this one to preserve the dignity of the deceased during all funeral and burial rites, right? And so, for example, the wasiya, the will, you notice that some of the examples he gave, you can say that I in my funeral, I want such and such to happen. I want my body to be covered. I do not want any religious rituals from other religions and so on. Why is that? It's to preserve the dignity of the deceased. A dignified Islamic funeral is according to the Sharia of the Muslims. And when you have all these outside influences coming in, then it leads to these problematic situations and so on. And you can specify, right, that I do not want any singing in my funeral. And I have to say that because it happens even among Muslims, right? And people uninvited will come up and start singing and so on, right? And I do not want laughing and joking during my funeral. You know, meaning from the people speaking, right? You can specify who you want to speak and so on. And you can do that in advance to try to make sure that your own funeral, right, will be carried out in a dignified manner. Also, we said one of the objectives is to focus on what will be of benefit to the deceased, to console the relatives. As we go along, you will see that we'll try to address all of these objectives. And then eventually we'll talk about the funeral prayer and then burying in the cemetery and so on, and how to do it, right? And the last one, that's what, you know, the wasiya and all of this is about, that the necessity of preparing for the death and the funeral rites of others, but also for ourselves, okay? So last time we had talked about what the dying person should do and the people around him. And I had given you all, and you all should have received on the WhatsApp group some du'as that, for example, when someone dies, and it's not just when someone dies, but any calamity, that there's a du'a that you can make. Everybody knows you start with inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun, but I had mentioned there's more to it than that. Can anyone recite it? Has anyone memorized it? You can't look at your phone, eh? You have to read from memory. I sent that today, yes, right? And has anyone memorized it from before? There will be a prize. Well, sorry? Very good. That Allah reward me through this calamity and replace it with something better for me, right? So this is a prize. Pass it to the brother, please. Right? Right? All right. So now we want to continue with what happens immediately after death, which is that the person's soul goes to Barzakh, to this place called the Barzakh, right? But before I start that, just some quick house announcements, that the sisters will have the clipboard with the names, and also the brothers, if you can pass it around, please. Only put your name if it is not already there. So only for the new attendees, please add your name to the list, right? I'm seeing some new faces. So the sisters as well, okay? And you'll have to turn the page to the second or third page to add names, please. And that is important. Once you put your name and your number, put a number that you have WhatsApp on, and we'll add you to the WhatsApp group, and you'll get all the material, all the slides, as well as a recording, okay? All right, so we want to continue with this topic tonight, life in Al-Barzakh, life in Al-Barzakh. So what is this Al-Barzakh? What is Al-Barzakh, right? Al-Barzakh, linguistically, it means a barrier between two things. Meaning in the Arabic language, that's what it means. But when we speak about the time after death, it is a state of existence of the soul immediately after the person's death until the day of resurrection, right? The day of resurrection, that's different. That's everybody is brought back to life and so on. What happens in between? In between, when the person's dies up to when they are resurrected, that time and that state is called Al-Barzakh. That's called Al-Barzakh. Is it a specific place? What does it look like and so on? Okay, I will keep mentioning this, that there are certain things that Allah and His Messenger have not given us detailed information on, and we should not delve into it. So especially when it comes to the barzakh, there are not many details, like many fine details about how exactly it looks like and all of that. And we just accept whatever Allah and His Messenger have told us, salam, and we don't delve any deeper than that, right? And there's towards the end, I'll make a point what we should be focusing on, okay? So we said the barzakh, it's a barrier, right? In the Arabic language, it's a barrier. And Allah says in Surah Al-Mu'minun, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, وَمِنْ وَرَائِهِمْ بَرْزَخٌ إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. That behind them, meaning when death reaches them, what comes after? A barzakh, a barrier until the day when they will be resurrected, right? So that's the name of that state. So what happens when you go into that state of being, which we call the barzakh, right? What happens at the time of death and immediately after? There's a long hadith, a famous hadith, the hadith of Al-Bara bin Azib, that I'm sure many of you would have heard, right, in English or Arabic, that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ informed, and I'm not going to quote it directly, right? I'll just summarize that when the person is dying, the angels come to the person, including the angel of death, to take his soul. And the righteous person, the soul exits very easily. But the immoral person, the sinful person, the soul is torn out, right? Harshly. And then the righteous person, the angels take the soul to the lowest heaven, and it will be open for him. And then they will take him to the next heaven, and so on and so on and so on, until he reaches the seventh heaven. And then Allah will command the angels to write the records of the deeds of the righteous person in the Illiyun, the register of good deeds. But the immoral person, the angels will take the soul to the lowest heaven, but it will not be open for him. Now, let me pause. The soul, what does the soul look like? Does it have a certain mass or weight? Is it the same size as the person? These things we do not delve into. We do not delve into those things. Can you measure it? And so on, right? I've heard people try all kind of strange things, like when a person is dying, they put them on a scale and they see if the weight of the person goes down when they die, meaning that the soul is extracted. So you can figure out how much the soul weighs. These things are just nonsense, right? The soul is something that we cannot perceive as human beings. We know that Allah has created the soul of each one of us. It exists. What it looks like, how it functions, all of these things, we leave it, we say that Allah knows best, right? And we should not delve into some of these things, okay? So, but we know the angels will take up the soul for the immoral person and the righteous person. The immoral person, the heaven will not be open for him. And Allah will command the angels to write the deeds of that immoral person in a register of evil deeds, which is called the Sijjin. And the soul of the person, whether righteous or immoral, will then be returned to the body, to the deceased body. How? We just say in a manner that Allah knows, okay? And again, we don't delve into these things. Then the person will be questioned by the two angels. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? And this question takes place in the grave, right? As we know, man rabbuka wa ma dinuka, and man nabiyuka, and so on. So there's, for those of you who did the Adhkar class, the word, the remembrance of the morning and the evening, there's a particular dhikr where we mention basically the answers to these. Go ahead, Uncle Janazah. Very good, right? That Raditu billahi rabban. I am pleased with Allah as my Lord. And that answers the first question. It essentially answers the first question. Wabil Islami dinan. And I'm pleased with Islam as a religion, as the second question. Wabi Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam nabiyan. Right? Or Rasulan. Okay? Which I am pleased with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a prophet. So Uncle Jinnah also must get a prize, as usual. Right? All right. We'll give the sisters a chance, right? Also, please, right? Right. And the hadith continues that then the grave of the righteous person will be expanded for him as far as the eye can see, and a door will be opened to Jannah, and he will receive the fragrance scent. Let me explain here. How does this happen? In a manner that Allah knows. It is not when we say the grave will be expanded, we do not mean the physical grave that we know with the dirt and so on. That will not be expanded. You can put a camera down there and you will see that nothing changes. And the person does not sit up in the body doesn't sit up in the grave, right? And so on. Nothing happens. All of these things take place in that state of being called the barzakh, which we cannot see. It is a state of existence, a plane of existence that is beyond our perception. In the same way that we cannot see the angels, right? We will not be able to see these things happening. But yes, it will happen. Yes, it will happen, right? That the righteous person will receive the scent of Jannah, okay? And the grave of the immoral person will compress him. Again, not the dirt that we see and that we could touch with our own hands, not that. Allah will make the grave narrow for that person in a manner that he knows, that Allah knows, right? And a door will be open to the fire so that he will receive some of its heat. Okay, so this shows us that the righteous person, the stay in al-barzakh will be pleasant, and for the immoral person, the stay in al-barzakh for that time will be unpleasant, right? Now, in that state, some souls may be punished in the grave, and we don't have time to go through all the hadith. When you get the notes, you can go through them. And some of the causes of punishment, though, you can look up those same hadiths, and so you can look them up. That spreading malicious gossip, go into him and say, you know what Uncle Janazah say, and you know what he did, and blah, blah, right, and so on. And it's malicious in order to make people get a negative opinion about the person we're gossiping about, to generate hatred in people's hearts for other Muslims, things like that, right? That kind of gossip. Soiling your clothes with urine, meaning that you are careless when you use the bathroom, and you're now soiling yourself and your clothes with urine. Lying, neglecting the Quran, adultery, riba, and so on. All of these things. If you read the hadiths about when the Prophet ﷺ went up on the Mi'raj, and so he I can't remember the exact hadiths right now, but there are various hadiths that talk about these punishments for people in the grave. But other souls, righteous souls, may experience happiness, pleasure, and may be allowed to be outside the confines of the grave. I do not mean they come home by you and visit you, right? And visit the family. And no, what do we mean by that? That, for example, the martyrs, the shuhada, there's a hadith that the souls of the martyrs will be in bodies of green birds roaming around in Jannah. So they are allowed to do that while they are in the state of al-barzakh. Understand? And I'll talk about the common beliefs that people have, hopefully not Muslims, that the souls of the people who walk around and visit people. I'll talk about that, inshallah, right? In fact, we'll talk about now that do the souls of deceased people visit? Sorry, let me backtrack. First, we'll start with the souls of the deceased, all of them in barzakh, right? Do they communicate? Meaning the deceased communicate with the deceased. Understand? So first we're starting with that. That do the deceased communicate with other deceased people in the state of al-barzakh? There's an authentic hadith in Sunan Nasai that when the soul of the person is taken at the time of death, so it's a newly deceased person, then the souls of other deceased believers, and it's a believer who has died, the souls of other believers come to meet him. They meet the person and they ask about what happened to this person who we left behind. But they ask about people who are still alive, who they knew in this world, right? And the deceased, this newly deceased soul may tell them something that they know and so on, right? But notice this happens immediately after death. Immediately after death, this is when this happens. That there's some communication between the newly deceased person and previously deceased people. Yes? And similarly, the disbeliever, the soul of the disbeliever is taken to the souls of the deceased disbelievers. Okay? So there appears to be some communication there. Now, this is an authentic hadith, But besides this authentic hadith, besides this specific occasion, which is right after death, understand? Right after someone has died, there are no authentic hadiths that clearly, explicitly state that the souls of the deceased, they visit each other. All the deceased people, and they're communicating with each other, or they visit each other, and so on. No, there is a hadith that some people may have heard. So there is a hadith that some people may have heard that whoever is responsible for his brother, meaning the person who is responsible for burying the person, let him beautify the shroud. Make sure you shroud the person beautifully, because the deceased visit one another dressed in these shrouds. So you have to make the shroud beautiful, you know. So when they go in the barzakh and they meet their relatives and so on, that they all look nice. Okay, this hadith is not authentic. And maybe some people have heard it and so, but it is not authentic, right? Now, I will tell you though that some scholars have inferred from the general meaning of certain ayat of Quran and hadiths and so on that the souls may in fact meet and communicate in al-barzakh. And what I'm saying is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is certainly capable of allowing them to communicate. Yes, Allah is capable of everything. He is certainly capable of doing that. But we do not have any clear, specific evidence that that happens. So we should just remain silent about it. We should not delve into that. We should remain silent about it. Yes, some scholars have said but they conclude that, right? Meaning that they don't have any clear, specific hadith, right? I know that people, you know, because of the love that they have for their parents and their uncle and aunt and so on, that what you wish for is that when all of them die, that they will be happy in the state of al-barzakh, and they will get to meet one another, and you know, and in the same way that they enjoyed each other's company in this world, that they will enjoy each other's company in the barzakh. Okay. Now, there is specific evidence from the Quran and Sunnah that in Jannah, but that is after al-barzakh, that is after resurrection, everything, that yes, that families will be reunited as long as they are all believers, right? That families will be reunited and so we don't have to worry about that. So work towards getting to Jannah, okay? What happens in al-barzakh? I'm just saying there's no clear evidence. But however, listen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not cruel. Allah is not oppressive. Allah is the most merciful. Allah is ar-Rahman, right? So the righteous person, his stay in al-barzakh will be pleasant. And let's leave it at that. Don't delve further into that. Well, will I get to meet my grandfather and my uncle and so on, right? Don't delve into those things. Know that Allah is the most compassionate, the most merciful, al-Latif and al-Rahman and al-Ra'uf, the most kind and so on. And so leave it in the hands of Allah that if you live a life of righteousness, your stay in al-barzakh will be good and pleasant, right? So that's it. The first issue is, do the souls communicate with one another? There's no clear evidence, right? We leave it, we say Allah knows best. The next question is, do the souls of the deceased communicate with the living people, right? Do the souls of the deceased communicate with the living people? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows the souls of the deceased to hear certain things from the living in specific occasions, specific situations, one of which is at the time of the burial. At the time of the burial, the deceased hears the footsteps of the people leaving, right? After he has been buried. The deceased will hear the footsteps of the people leaving. Also, there was a particular occasion, the Battle of Badr, right? And those of you who have studied the Sirah, and I encourage you to go to any classes that there are in other masajid or in this masjid where we talk about the Sirah. There's a battle that was fought called the Battle of Badr during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet, after the battle, the Prophet ﷺ went to the dead bodies of the enemies of Islam and rebuked them and reprimanded them, spoke to them, right? And asked them certain questions and so on, to rebuke them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made those dead enemies of Islam, they heard what the Prophet ﷺ said, right? We have evidence for it because it comes from an authentic hadith, right? So we have evidence for these situations well, one situation was in the past, in the Battle of Badr, and one situation is it occurs in every single person who is buried, right? We know that it occurs. But besides those situations, there is no evidence, there's no, again, no clear evidence from the Quran and Sunnah that the deceased soul hears the living in other situations, right? No, you may ask, and when we later on in the class, we'll have, because we'll try to do it in order, right? Because before death, then the person has died, then you bathe them, then you shroud them, then you bury them, and so on. So when we talk about, and then you visit them, you visit the graveyard, right? When we talk about visiting the graveyard, we'll talk about the dua that you make when you go visit the graveyard, right? Assalamu alaikum ahla diyar. Okay, wait, try. There will be when we reach our class, there will be a prize, right? Inshallah. If you could, I see already some people know it. But what does it mean? Assalamu alaikum, or people of the graves, or people of these graves. So you may say, well, you are given salam to the people of the graves, which is a greeting. So does it mean that they hear? Does it mean that they hear that greeting, right? There is a hadith that, again, you may have heard or you may see it on the internet. This hadith, that there is no servant who passes by the grave of a deceased person whom he knew in this world, the living person, and knew this deceased person, and he gives salam to him, this dua that we say, except that the deceased is made aware of it. The deceased is aware of it and returns the salam to him. This hadith is not authentic. This hadith is not authentic, right? You will find on the internet that yes, some people will say it's authentic and so on, but I have looked at the scholars who examined it in detail, and they said, no, it is not authentic, right? No, and I understand that the confusion is, well, why are we greeting them? They can't hear us. They cannot hear us. Why are we greeting them? Okay, this is because, we have, in general, Muslims have a limited understanding of what the salam means. And we should try to have a better understanding of what does it mean when we say assalamu alaikum. It is more than just a greeting. It is a dua. It is a dua we are making for the person. What does it mean, assalamu alaikum? That salam means safety and security. That may safety and security be upon you. What are we at? We are asking Allah to keep this person safe. Safe from the dangers of this world, both material, safety from violence and crime and so on, and also spiritual, meaning safety from falling into sin, safety from disbelief, and then safety in the next world, meaning safety from the punishment of the grave and the punishment of the fire and so on. That is really what the assalamu alaikum means. And when you greet your brother or your sister, when you say that, you should try to remember that you are really try to make a sincere dua for them, right? Some scholars say what it means is, Assalam is one of the names of Allah. And when you say Assalamu alaikum, it means may Assalam, meaning Allah, be over you as a protector. But then the meaning is the same, because it means that may Assalam, may Allah protect you from everything in this world and everything in the hereafter, right? So the meaning is actually the same, right? So similarly, when we go to the graveyard and we say Assalamu alaikum ahla diyar, it is not just a greeting, it's a dua we are making for them, that may Allah keep them safe from anything that can harm them, from the punishment of the grave, from the punishment of the fire, understand? But not only that, do they hear? No, we said, right, there's no clear evidence. But again, just as how I said, Allah is capable of making the deceased people communicate with one another, and Allah knows best. Certainly, He is capable of making the deceased person hear when we give salam, but there is no clear evidence for it. So again, don't delve into it. Don't delve into those things. Go to the cemetery, and when we do the class on visiting the graveyard, we will study how to visit the cemetery, what we should say, how to make dua. And that's what we should focus on. Focus on making dua in the manner that the Prophet ﷺ taught us. Make sincere dua for the deceased person. Focus on, and remember, one of the objectives of the whole course is focusing on what will be of benefit to deceased. That giving salam and making dua, that will be of benefit to deceased. So focus on that. Don't focus on, do they hear me? Do they reply to the salam? Do they know how much I miss them? Do they know how much I love them? Right? And so on, right? And if I go by the grave and converse with them, will they hear me? Don't focus on these things. Focus on what will be of benefit to the deceased, right? So in addition to that, that particular issue of giving salam, in general, communicating with the deceased souls, we have to be careful. Because in this society, as well as in other societies, there are various superstitions and beliefs that people have about communicating with the deceased people, but there's no authentic evidence for certain beliefs that the deceased soul moves about on the earth, that the deceased soul visits the family. There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence that that when the person has died, I don't know if you all ever heard this, and I've heard that some non-Muslims in Trinidad believe this, that the reason why you must have a wake, right, and keep waking up in the night is because the deceased soul will be restless until it is buried. So you have to be awake in the house to keep the soul company. So something I don't know all the details, but again, there's no evidence for any of that. That the relatives need to stay awake, right? Also, that the deceased soul visits the family's home or stays in the family home for 40 days after their death. I don't know if anyone has heard that, right? And that is, some people will say that is the justification for reciting Quran for 40 days, right? Which has no, but that has no basis in Islam, right? And we'll talk about that when we talk about what benefits the deceased, right? So there's no evidence of any of these things. These are all just superstitions, and we should pay no attention to these foolish superstitions. We should rely on the Quran and the authentic Sunnah for our beliefs and practices, and our beliefs about what happens after death. And as I had mentioned, whatever Allah and His Messenger have said about that time, that state of al-barzakh, we accept. Whatever they have not told us about, leave it alone. Don't delve into it, right? But rather, what we should be focusing on is preparing for that time, preparing for going into that state of al-barzakh while we are alive, right? And I'll mention that again. Now, some people may say, well, we are saying that the person is questioned in the grave and they have to answer these questions and so on, right? And that the soul is taken out of the body and then returned to the body. What if there's no body to return it to? Because the person may be cremated, the person may have died in an accident where there's a fire and the entire body is totally destroyed, right? And that happens in times of war and so on, right? That, you know, when a bomb falls, there may be nothing left. Or the person maybe how can they be questioned in the grave if they were never buried? Because they're, you know, those of you who know about mountain climbing, you know, there are people who died on Mount Everest. And what can you do? Nothing. You have to leave the body right there, right? And the body is never buried, right? Or people die in the wilderness and they're never buried. Or the body is eaten. The body is eaten by wild animals, so they're never buried, right? What happens? The events of al-barzakh, I said, it is not in this physical world. It is in a state of being that Allah knows. So these events will occur. The person will be questioned, right? The person will be, the righteous person will experience the fragrance of Jannah, even if he's not buried in a grave. The unrighteous person will experience the heat of Jahannam and so on, even if he's not buried in a grave. So these events will occur. We must have firm belief that these events will occur in a manner that Allah knows, but we cannot physically see them. And all of these events, all of the affairs of al-barzakh is from the unseen world. Like I said, the angels, we believe in the angels, but we cannot see them. And we should not delve into it. How can I communicate to Jibreel? And don't ask these questions. Don't delve into those things. Similarly with the barzakh, don't delve into it, into the exact manner in which these events occur and what al-barzakh looks like and so on. But instead, as I said, focus on what will be of benefit to ourselves. Focus on preparing for those events, right? Before our own deaths. Focus on that. by doing many good deeds, right, in this life. So that is what I wanted to say about the life in Al-Barzakh. There's much more that could be said, and there's actually a book that Uncle Janazah has, Life in Al-Barzakh by Muhammad Al-Jibali, and there are other books as well that will have more details, right? But I wanted to keep it brief and to bring across the point that accept what is in the Quran and Sunnah, don't delve beyond that, and focus on what is actually a benefit, which is preparing for that time in Al-Barzakh, right? Okay, so quickly, any questions on the life in Al-Barzakh? Any questions on this particular topic? Be aware, as I said, because it is from the unseen, there's only so much I can answer, right? Yes. Yeah.
Is it possible for that experience to kind of very quickly do
The brother is asking that it is recommended we make dua for the deceased person. He's asking, can the experience of the person in Al-Barzakh change because of our dua? I would say Allah knows best, right? We are encouraged to make dua, and we are encouraged to ask Allah to protect the person from the punishment of the fire and the punishment of the grave. And the punishment of the grave is in Al-Barzakh. Why are we encouraged to make that dua for them? Clearly, it's not just words that we are saying, right? So if we make sincere dua and so on, then will it alleviate any punishment in the grave for the person? If you make sincere dua and is accepted, yes, right? So make sincere dua and hope for the best for your deceased relatives and for the deceased Muslims as a whole, right? Any other question? Yes. You mean the grave that we see? Right, okay. The brother is asking, is the grave, right, the brother is asking, is the grave, meaning the physical grave that we dig, is that part of Al-Barzakh? And I'm saying that no, the events of Al-Barzakh take place on a plane of existence that we cannot see, right? I'm saying if you put a camera down there, you will not see the deceased person sitting up to answer the questions you will not see the angels come down in the grave, right? You will not see any of that. But we know these events occur. So the actual physical grave, when we say the grave is expanded, Allah knows what is meant by that. The state in which the person is in will be made expanded, will be made comfortable. The state in which his soul is in, which we cannot see, will be made comfortable for him. It will be expanded. He will receive the fragrance of Jannah. But we will not smell it. We will not see it. Nothing, right? If you dig up the grave, what will you see? You will not see the soul of the person. You will just see the body of the person decomposing and so on. Okay? All right. Any question from this? Give your sisters a chance. Any question from the sister? No. All right. All right. Saeed had a question. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right. All right. So the brother is asking, we said, I had addressed, can the souls in Al-Barzakh hear the living people? And he's asking, what about the reverse, that can the living people receive communication from the souls of the deceased, especially in dreams? And many of us, especially soon after the death of a relative, that happens, right? When my grandfather died, and quite a few of the relatives kept getting dreams of him and saying certain things and so on. And many of us have experienced that, as I said, that you will get dreams of your deceased relatives. So what the scholars have said is that that there is no clear evidence that the deceased can communicate with the living people through dreams. Certainly some of these dreams, and what they have noticed though is that throughout history, people have received dreams, and it turns out that what the deceased person says turns out to be true, right? The information they get in the dream and so on turns out to be true. Does that mean that it was actually the soul of the person who communicated with you? Or was it that it's just your brain figured out this information and and it came in the form of a dream, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this information somehow through a dream, and there's such a thing as true dreams in Islam. But the scholars have said, there is no clear evidence, again, that it happens. Some of them say, well, perhaps it may be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows the deceased person to give you true information in a dream. But again, the best thing is to just remain silent on that. Don't make any definitive statement, because again, it opens the door to people making all kinds of strange claims that you can communicate with the dead and so on, right? If it happens, you get a dream and it turns out to be true, say alhamdulillah, right? If the dream turned out to be true. But whether it was really your grandfather also, like, Allah knows best, right? I will mention, okay, so these issues of with the dead communicate with the living and the living communicate with the dead and all these kinds of things, that please let us take our beliefs from, as I said, from the Quran and the Sunnah, and especially because we live in the West, that we should not take our beliefs or ideas from Western media, from movies and so on, that you will see people, they visit the graveyard and they sit down by the grave and they talk, they converse with the person there, and they're thinking that the person hears them, and all these kinds of things, right? That please don't be influenced by that, right? And again, focus on what will be of benefit for the deceased, which is asking for their forgiveness, making dua for them, and so on, right? I want to move on, please, right? So, in the time we have remaining, I want to start this topic, bathing and shrouding of the deceased. We have some time. The adhan is at 7:50, right? 7:50, right? So we'll just start this, and then we'll stop in time to have some questions before the adhan, right? I don't want to go beyond time of adhan. So we want to start this talk. So now, as I said, we're going in order. We started with before the person dies, then immediately after the will and the life in al-barzakh, and now we have to bathe the deceased, right? And then shroud. So we'll start with bathing, right? Now, I want to encourage everyone to learn how to bathe and to participate in the bathing, because there is indeed a great reward. In a hadith and a mustadrak of al-Hakim, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that whoever washes a dead body and bear this in mind, and fakatama alayhi, he conceals what he notices during the bathing, he will be forgiven 40 times. What does it mean he conceals? When you are bathing someone, and those of us who have bathed other people, you will know, right, that you may see some defects on the body and so on, right? You should, now remember, one of the objectives is, when through this entire course, is preserving the dignity of the deceased. If you see some defect on the person's body, do not go outside the funeral home and tell other people about it, please, right? Preserve the person's dignity. Bathe him, shroud him nicely, or her, give them a nice appearance, and let the people remember them with that appearance, right? That they had a beautiful, dignified appearance. And now it is a fact that depending on how the person died, certain things may happen. And there's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. When some people die of a stroke, blood will keep coming out of the nose, right? And so while you are bathing, you will see that, and you have to clean it up and so on. Don't go publicize that. Let people remember the person in a good state, right? And similarly, if a woman dies in childbirth, the woman will know that there will be bleeding and so on. And again, there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? You bathe and you shroud the person and clean the person properly and so on, right? But don't divulge all this information. If a person dies in an accident, a car accident, there may be severe damage to the body, and so the limbs may be all broken and all of that. And so, again, don't go talk about that. Imagine the close relative. Imagine if someone's son or daughter dies in a car accident, and then you go and tell the parents, well, his arm was broken so that the arm was bent backwards. And do you think the person will feel nice? No. Try to give the person comfort, right? And soothe them during the show compassion, and bring some comfort to their hearts during this time of trial, right? So we do not speak about any defects and so on that we saw during the bathing, right? The deceased should be handled and moved and bathed gently and with reverence and dignity. In fact, there's a hadith that the Prophet said, breaking the bone of the deceased is like breaking it when the person is alive. And that is a general principle when we are bathing, that we do not treat the body harshly because it is as if when they were alive. Would you do that? Would you throw them on the table and no, and by the way, breaking the bone, you may think that is an exaggeration, but this actually happens among the non-Muslims. Among the non-Muslims, in order to make the person fit into the nice suit and so on, they may have to break some bones, right? Or if the person died and rigor mortis set in, you know what's rigor mortis, when the body becomes stiff? So they died and the body was not found until sometime later. Well, they may have died with their arm out like this, right? So in order to get the person in the coffin, you know, in the nice pose and so on, what did they do? They may break the socket here, right? And so we as Muslims do not do that. We do not do, if a person dies in rigor mortis and the rigor mortis sets in, we just bathe them how they are and we shroud them how they are and we bury them how they are. With dignity, with gentleness and so on. There will be in the last session, Brother Azran, who some of you may know, who has the funeral home in Felicity, he will do a demonstration and he will emphasize that as well, that everything has to be done with gentleness and dignity. And I want to add this, that I said it is that I encourage everybody to learn how to bathe. It does not mean that you have to be an expert. I just want you to get the basic procedure and the correct attitude, which is this, that you treat the person with dignity. Why? Because nowadays what we do is we go to like Brother Azran's funeral home or Shayam or one of the other Islamic funeral homes. They will have the expert. They will have their experienced people, but you will go and help them. And in fact, they encourage that. They encourage that the close relatives come and help them with the bath and participate. So you will get that reward. So, but you don't have to worry about, well, you know, I don't have experience, I don't know exactly what to do and so on. They will guide you through the whole thing. And they will have, you know, especially if you are not a very strong person, well, how am I going to turn the body? How am I going to lift the body? They have people, they have able-bodied people who will do help with all of that, right? Okay. Now, the ruling on bathing is that it is fard kifaya. What does it mean, fard kifaya? That someone in the Muslim community must do it, right? At least one person has to do it. If it is not done, then the entire Muslim community around the world and the entire Muslim community bears the sin, right? But as long as one person or more does it, bathes the deceased, then the responsibility has been fulfilled, right? How do we know that? I don't want to get into too much detail. That there was an incident in Hajj where a man fell off his camel, and we'll keep coming back to this person. May Allah have mercy on him, because we learned many things from this incident. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ told them, "Iksiluhu," right? And he died in Arafah, right? And bathe him with water and with sidr. And we'll talk about what is sidr, right? But how do we know that it is compulsory? It is not compulsory on every single person, but on the community. Because did the Prophet ﷺ mean that every single person in Arafah has to go and participate in the bathing? No. It just means 4 or 5 people go and bathe the person. You understand? So it is not, when we say it is fard kifaya, it doesn't mean that you, every single Muslim person who dies in Trinidad, you, the individual, has to go and bathe them. No. It's that somebody has to go and bathe them, right?
Suppose you just go and what?
I will talk about that. That it is not a show, right? It is not a show. There's a very serious affair that we should approach in a very dignified manner, right? Now, in general, the general rule is that males will bathe a male deceased and females will bathe a female deceased. There is one exception, right? There's one that I will mention, but I do not encourage it. It is not practical. The one exception is that a husband can bathe his deceased wife, and a wife can bathe her deceased husband, because the Prophet ﷺ had said to Aisha that if you were to die before me, I will take care of you and wash you and shroud you. And Aisha herself said, after the Prophet ﷺ had died, well, the men bathed him, but she said, if I had known what I know now, that she understood the ruling now, that no one would have bathed the Prophet ﷺ except the wives, that the wives would have done it, right? And there are narrations that among the Sahaba, there were wives who bathed the husbands and husbands bathed the wives, right? So yes, it is permissible, but it is, in our times, it is not practical. It is not practical. What do I mean? If the husband is going to bathe the wife, who is going to help him? Who is going to help him? Other men cannot go. Only the husband can go. So other men cannot go. So who is going to help him? Well, if other women go, but then those of you who have experience in bathing, you know it's a thing you have to roll up your sleeves, the woman I mean, to bathe. And so non-mahram women can't go there and help him, right? So so it becomes, it becomes impractical. He has to find women who will be eligible to help him. Similarly, the reverse. If the wife is bathing the husband, no other men can go. And sometimes if if the husband is a big person, well, you need people to now turn the body and so on, and other men can't go. So it becomes impractical. It becomes impractical. And so please just leave it that let men bathe the men and let women bathe the woman and keep it easy, right? So we'll end here with this, right? That we said females bathe females, men bathe females. There's another exception according to the scholars that females can bathe a male child, but under the age of 7. And similarly, males can bathe a deceased female child under the age of 7, right? Again, it is better, just let the woman bathe the female child and just let the men bathe the male child. It's easier, right? And so, but I'm saying that yes, it is permissible. But here's the thing, what you must understand. A deceased male over the age of 7 cannot be bathed by female, even if it's his own mother and sister and daughter and so on. Understand? I know the relatives want to get involved, but no. Once the person the male is above 7, no woman can get involved. It has to be men. Similarly, any child, any female above the age of 7, no men can get involved, even if it's her own father, her own brother, and so on. Let her mother get involved, let her sister and aunt and so on, right? So the only allowance we said for people above the age of 7 is the spouses. The wife can bathe the husband can be the wife, but again, it is not practical. It is not something practical. So I'm saying leave the general rule that males bathe males and females bathe females, and then we avoid all these difficulties and so, right? The last point people have asked is that a menstruating woman, can she bathe another woman and shroud the woman? There is no evidence to prevent that. There's no evidence that says a menstruating woman cannot bathe a woman. Menstruation is not a disease that is passed from one person to another. Please, yes, the person is in a state of impurity, and there are certain things she cannot do. She cannot hold the Quran, the Mus'haf, the Quran. She cannot pray Salah, she cannot fast, and so on. Yes, but there are many other things that she can do, and she, according to my understanding, and so that yes, she can be, right? So we'll stop here and we'll continue with bathing and shrouding, because I want to leave some time for questions before the other. Again, questions on Life in Al-Barzakh, this short piece on bathing, and what Brother Mirza talked about, the wasiyah, the words. Any questions? Yes.
If the person died, like drowned,
Yes.
why would we?
Yes. We will talk about the exceptions of bathing. That in general, it's the shaheed, the martyr who dies on the battlefield. He is not bathed. Everybody else is bathed. Now, an interesting question is, if the body like that has drowned and you didn't find the body for a number of days, and the body has started decomposing, how do you bathe them? You still bathe them, and you bathe them very, very gently. And Brother Azran has in fact experienced all of that. Someone dies with open wounds, they died in a fire, and so on. You bathe them, but you bathe them very, very gently. Sometimes you just have to sprinkle water and so on. The practical side of it, Brother Azran can talk more about that. But the general rule is that you do not harm the body and you treat the body with dignity. Right?
You know the thing, if a body is burnt beyond recognition and there's ashes and little parts, so people you don't bathe that as well. You just collect everything and you piece it together and we don't bathe something like that. I've had a situation with Kadusha when he was missing for several days. Couldn't find him until 5, 6, 7 days after. There's a lot of decomposition happening. As Prabhasar is saying,
as Sheikh Asad is saying, we in fact bathed the body. Family members, it was a difficult task, really difficult task for the family actually go and do it, but the bathing was gentle, just enough to be able to, fulfill the requirements. But there'll be situations where fire and so on happen, that you really literally can't.
Any other topic related questions? Yes.
Okay.
Certainly there are say signs of a good end. Like especially if the person died while they were praying Salah, died while they were in Hajj, and so those are good things that we should feel good about, right? And we have hope for the person. And similarly, when they die, you may see that their face looks peaceful and so on. What we should be careful about, I had mentioned this in the last class. Anyone can remember what you need to be careful about? That you testify, that you say definitively that this person is going to Jannah, right? That's what you have to be careful about. We do not testify for the righteousness or for the fact that he's going to Jannah for anyone, but we have hope and we think positively about every deceased Muslim. Every deceased Muslim, we hope that they will go to Jannah, and we ask Allah that they go to Jannah. And they, especially for the relatives, and so, if they see the person looks peaceful, and so they may get some comfort from that, and that's good. But they must not make a definitive statement that this shows that the person is going to Jannah, right?
It's okay. For the people in Gaza, we're hearing some good smelling bodies. Allah knows best. We're hearing some of them dying with smiling faces. Allah knows best. So it's okay to say, I testified that I saw a smiling face within their person. The person looks very comfortable, free to say so. But stop short of saying this person look like they're Jannatis or Jahannamis and so on. You have to be careful and stop short of saying that. I wanted to make one quick point based on the question you asked earlier, or not writing a will. The law in which we live, the land in which we live, if something is not in writing, it doesn't exist. If it is not in writing, it does not exist. However, you can have an understanding with family members verbally, but the law of the land and says if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Sorry, sister, yeah. Yeah, if whether that is considered hurt, you understand?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay, so what I will say is that when we reach the burial and so on, we will see that the Prophet ﷺ said, hasten with the janazah, hasten with the funeral rites, and we really should follow that sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, right? Does the freezing hurt the body? Allah knows best, right? If that happens. Now, in some cases, it is unavoidable. It's unavoidable because, like, for example, if there's a police investigation and the police come in and take over the body and say, you can't do anything. And of course, they will take the body to the morgue and the body will be frozen. I have seen it myself, even in Hajj, that, and they will try to bury the body as quickly as possible. But when a foreigner, and when this happened, when some Trinidadian Hujjaj died, that it is unavoidable that, you see, there are legal issues that you need to get permission from the Trinidadian relative, right, and clear it with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that may take a day or two. So yes, the people were taken to the morgue and to the cold room, and it was unavoidable, even in a Muslim state where they want to bury the person as quickly as possible. So what I would answer is that, look, we should try to avoid that as much as we can. That don't, bury the person as quickly as possible so that they do not have to be frozen. And please do not let auntie in New York and uncle in England tell you that you have to wait for them to come and delay the janazah and so on. And as a general issue, that is a problem, that we have too many people being in charge. And coming back to the wasiya, again, in your wasiya, you can state, I want such and such a person to be responsible for my janazah and my burial and so on, and I want no delay in it, and you can specify these issues.
Do whatever is within, whatever is within your control. If you can be able to get the body and prepare it and bury within hours, then alhamdulillah. There are some situations we have had where we, in fact, do the janazah, and the non-Muslim family members take the body. They're going to cremate it. You have no control over that. Therefore, for for autopsy, you have no control. If it's a murder case, for example, so you do what you can within the capacity that you have, and then leave the rest up to Allah. Yes.
I didn't hear the question.
Does the hastening of the burial have anything to do with the questioning in the grave?
As far as I know, no. The brother is saying that, is there any connection between hastening the burial and the question in the grave? Now, the question in the grave happens after the burial, yes. But is that the reason why we hasten them? No. There's a reason that the Prophet ﷺ stated, which we will get to when we talk about burial, right? So, as a little preview.
For those who witness any janazah in Medina, for example, anybody witness a janazah in Medina, what happens? What do they do? They literally move quickly and run with the body. Literally understanding is we don't have to literally do that, but yes, if it is, we can as early as we possibly can then take the body to the cemetery. So what a question. Last maybe 2 and we close off for start.
You make it throughout, but it would charity.
Yeah.
These what you see, things
The brother is asking that if someone dies, like they died in the wilderness and the body was never found, something like that, or they were cremated, or in any case, any situation where they were not buried in a traditional grave, right? That do we still make the dua, Allahumma a'idhu min adhab al-qabr wa min adhab an-nar, that Allah protect him from the punishment of the grave, the punishment of the fire? I would say that Allah knows best, but to the best of my knowledge, yes, because the punishment in the grave is again the punishment in the state of barzakh, not in this physical grave that we see, right? So, and Allah knows best, right? But to the best of my understanding, yes, you use the words that the Prophet ﷺ taught us.
Yes, some other issues related to if you can't find the body. Imagine a woman married to somebody, a plane crash, they can't find the body. What is her iddah? Anybody know how long does she wait before she get married again? You have to answer. Let's train that in. There are fake issues in terms of how long. If 4 months and 10 days, there's no work with this case. It's a special case where you have no body. If she get married now to somebody after 1 year and then the husband show up, what does she do? Those are really issues. But alhamdulillah, if it handles those things. We're going to close off now, inshallah. I hope this session has been useful for you. We continue next week as usual. And we're taking you through a series until we really get to the end, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. If you didn't sign up so you could get the material. Anybody didn't get the material yet from last week? Probably because you didn't have a sign up yet. So, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. And there's a book here. Tell them what book.
Right. So, Bamboo Jama had in the past printed a book about funeral rites, and it's quite good. And in fact, we'll have some of the same material that I'm presenting. So they kindly sent some copies to be distributed. I would ask that families take one, because we may not have enough for everyone. So, you know, like a husband, wife, just take 1 copy, please, right? هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.